Hi guys, good morning. I have to make my bed, so look at this hair. Oh my gosh. Let me get it together. Guys, I was just cleaning my room and I come out and he's just sitting there like that. Like he's the goodest boy in the world. Sit. That's a good boy. So I don't have pillows right now because I need to wash my pillows. I'm very hungry. I didn't really eat yesterday. Yesterday I had 2 ground turkey tacos with cheese on it, some sour cream and avocado. I had an apple and I had an Oikos yogurt. So that's probably only like 50 grams of protein. So yeah, I haven't been really hungry lately. I think it's just the shock of everything that I just went through. Like I'm processing it in a healthy way, right? Like I'm allowing my mind to process it, my body to process it. I'm not like force feeding myself. I'm just, it's still shocking, right? Because you expect people that are supposed to protect you, you expect them to protect you, you know, but this isn't new to me. I've been left unprotected many times in life. So God has been the only one protecting me. And now that I live under his wing, under his safety, under his wing of safety, I can count on him to protect me from the wicked schemes of the enemy, right? So I'm always grateful for that. Last night I fell asleep at 10 p.m. Like, whoa, that was early. Going from not being able to sleep until 6 a.m. and 3 a.m. to falling asleep at 10 p.m. I felt like my body was just trying to catch up, right? So I did that, and then I had a dream last night. I had a dream. I don't know if I should share this one. I'm gonna keep this one to myself, but yeah, I had a dream. It was very cool, very cool. God is doing a good work, and I'm excited to bring you guys along with me on this journey of mine because it is art with God and I. And let's be respectful, okay? Especially if you're going to somebody else's content. Let's respect. Like, if you don't respect, then you shouldn't be here. And if you disrespect, just be careful. Because my dad does not play about me. Okay. I have this huge pillow right here. It's really long. And I hug it at night and I pretend it's my husband. You know what? God says, okay? God says that when you pray for something, believe that you already have it and it's yours, okay? So, okay, but no, on a serious note, I got this originally because when I was seeing my physical therapist for my shoulder and for my knee pain, he told me to get a pillow and put it between my legs when I go to sleep and then to hug a pillow when I go to sleep. And that'll keep me from like smushing my shoulders together when I'm sleeping and not having enough support for my knees. So I got this guy and very helpful, very, very helpful. Sometimes like now I can't sleep without it because if my knees are touching, it just feels so wrong. So I don't sleep without this guy, and my shoulders feel so much better ever since I started using this because even though the pain is gone, if I don't sleep with this, I start to feel tightness in my shoulder. But because of this, I no longer feel that tightness in my shoulder. So I definitely noticed a difference. So I highly recommend a body pillow if you don't have one. It's pretty long, but it's time to wash, so I'm gonna throw it in the washing machine. Are you the goodest boy in the world? Are you my joggers? Are you dinkies? Are you sugar? Are you my dinky sugar? Okay guys, I am making eggs. I'm gonna make 4 eggs with cheese and butter and 2 tortillas. I made my nephew these eggs yesterday, and when I gave it to him, he was like, whoa, and I was like, what? He's like, no, they just look so good. I was like, thanks. Thanks, lots of practice. Now we're gonna eat this outside, and then we're gonna get in the Word. unless you change and you become like a child, you will not be able to see the kingdom, right? And it means like having the ability to have childlike faith, to believe in things. When you're a child, you can imagine and you can dream all of the beautiful things, right? And you have so much innocence, and it's before the world gets in and does the damage that the world is very good at doing, right? So when you learn to become like a child, you can walk in that faith, you can walk in that belief of a child. When Jesus was here, he said, the kingdom of heaven is here, right? It is among you. And so we get the privilege of living in heaven before we get to eternal heaven with our Father. And I just think that's so beautiful. And that's why, like, I feel like we live in a society, we live in a world where it's like, you want to be older faster, you want to look older, you want to look like this person, right? And you just, like, you lose sight of the sweetness and being innocent. You lose sight of the sweetness of being childlike. You lose sight of feeling youthful, right? And I mean, for me personally, people always think that I'm like 17 to 20 and or just around those ages, and I'm not. I'm gonna be 30 this year. Like, and so I have a lot of history. I have a lot of history. People that are older are gonna be like, well, you have no history, and then people that are younger will be like, whoa, she's old. But like my nephews, they don't let me forget that I'm ancient. The older people in my life, right? My mom's gonna be 70 soon, and she's always talking about how I'm so young. So age is relative, right? But with that being said, I don't think about my age as, like, it used to kind of weird me out that I was getting older, right? And I think that's normal because of the society that we live in. But I think once you become childlike, it doesn't even matter what age you are, right? Because you feel like God's child. You feel like his baby. You feel so loved and cared for and taken care of that you don't have to that you don't have to like grow up, essentially, right? But look what started playing. All I want is you. As I'm saying that, all God wants is you, because he loves you so much. Unless you're an abusive, unrepentant person, then God is mad at you right now. Okay, let's get into scriptures. We're in Job chapter 3. So I think because I tend to dissect these things very deeply, it's what I do best. I dissect the things. I dissect a lot of things. I had to dissect a frog in high school one time. I watched. I didn't participate really. Like, I kind of did. I don't even remember how I felt. I can imagine feeling very uncomfy, but I can remember visually looking at what was happening. I don't think I touched the stuff, though. Job speaks. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. But he didn't curse God. He said, may the day of my birth perish, and the night it was said, a boy is born. That day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine upon it. May darkness and deep shadow claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm its light. Okay, he's talking about the day he was born. That's dark. That night may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year, nor be entered in any of the months. May that night be barren. May no shout of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning stars become dark. May it wait for daylight in vain and not see the first rays of dawn. For it did not shut the doors of the womb on me to hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me, and breasts that I might be nursed? For now I would be lying down in peace, I would be asleep and at rest, with kings and counselors of the earth who built for themselves places now lying in ruins, with rulers who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. Captives also enjoy their ease. They no longer hear the slave drivers shout. The small and the great are there, and the slave is freed from his master. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come? who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighing comes to me instead of food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. And that completes the chapter, so now let's get into it. Okay, so you might think this is very dark, right? But it gets darker than that. And he's pretty much just saying that he wished he was never born. And that tragedy should have hit the day that he was born, right? So instead of cursing God, he cursed himself. And that shows his humility, because he's saying that even though Satan wants him to have every reason to believe that he should want to be dead, he knows that in God, there is no need for all of that, right? Well, not yet. He's still processing his feelings, which is healthy. Job is a healthy man. He goes through a really long time. You're going to get a sense of how long it is, right? Because we're going to be reading a chapter a day, and it's going to be like, man, when is this going to end? And that's what it feels like when you're in hell. It feels like, I want this to end, right? And God allows us to experience a taste of hell here on earth as well, so that we don't spend eternity in hell, right? So he gives us the ability to choose. And so for somebody like Job, that was a righteous man and that did not deserve to lose everything that he lost, in comparison to somebody that does deserve it because of their really, really bad nature and actions and demonic activity, right? But with Job, he was a righteous man and he didn't deserve what happened to him. So even the scriptures say that he was not wrong in telling God, like, why are you doing this to me? Right? Like, there are moments in life when we can ask God, why is this happening to me? And God will kneel down and he will answer you. God is a humble God. Look. She's somebody's daughter. She's somebody's everything. So if you... What does he say? She's somebody's daughter. Her daddy bought her first car. Yes, he did. Taught her how to drive. She's pigtails blowing and candles on her birthday cake. Yeah, she's a daddy's girl. Never treat her right. She's somebody's daughter. She's somebody's everything. Yeah, she's somebody's daughter. She's somebody's whole world. She's somebody's baby. And if you don't treat her right, hers won't be the only heart you'll break. I'm God's daughter. If you break my heart, you're breaking his heart, man. But my husband would never break my heart because he loves me very much. I'm well aware of that. Okay. Look, it's my birthday. It's my birthday. I was definitely not as poetic as Job is with the distress that he's going through, right? The last time that I was extremely depressed in my life, I was 22. I was 22 when I read the book. I was going through the darkest season of my life. I had lost everything I had worked so hard for 4 years, but in those 4 years, I was not with God. I wasn't following God. I loved him and I knew him as a little girl and I grew up with him, and God would send me dreams when I was a little girl. One dream in particular was after my brother passed away. I went to God. I was like 9 years old, maybe still 8, like around a little bit after he had passed. So I start praying and I'm like, God, please, I really miss my brother. I really want to dream about him. Can you please send me a dream? That night I fell asleep and I woke up in the front yard of my childhood home, and I saw him outside of our gate in front of our neighbor's house, standing in the street, kind of confused as to what he was doing there. And I run out of the gate and I run to him and I give him a big hug and I'm like, Christian, it's you. Like, you're here. I prayed to God and asked him if I could dream about you, and he sent me a dream, and I was so happy. And he goes, he just looks at me like confused. I'm like, Christian, it's me, it's Michelle, your sister. Don't you remember me? And he's like, no. And I was like, okay. I was like, come on, do you want to go play? He's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then we just started playing, and that was my dream. it just goes to show that those that are in the presence of God do not remember the things of this world, right? They're in heaven with God. And in that moment, I didn't even care. I was just so happy to be in his presence, you know? And I always knew God was real, but I went through spiritual manipulation, just like I did recently. I went through that when I was around 18 years old, 19, around there, before I turned 20. And it traumatized me so bad that I wanted nothing to do with God. And so I stayed away from him for 4 years, but he did not stay away from me. I mean, he definitely was there protecting me along those 4 years while I was in San Francisco, but it was definitely a prison. Like, I made a prison of my trauma. And so I started reading psychology books, and I started learning about the unhealthy dynamics, the unhealthy relationships that existed around me. And I was like, whoa, like, I gotta wake up to all of this, right? And so I did, and people called me crazy, and they were like, you've changed. And I was like, no, I've just opened my eyes. Like, I'm aware now that I'm being taken advantage of, and I gotta get out of this situation. So because my mental health tanked and my spiritual health was non-existent at the time, God was always calling me home to him. But at that time, I wasn't ready. I still was carrying a lot of the trauma that I went through, not only from my childhood, but also the relationship that I was in, and then also what happened in the church. So I blamed God for all of those things at that time because of lack of knowledge. The scriptures say, my people perish for lack of knowledge. I remember even coming across that scripture and just falling to my knees and saying, God, forgive me, for I have sinned, essentially. Like, I realized how wrong I was about everything. Since then, my life has elevated completely because God had different plans for me, right? So that's why it's only up from here. But with that being said, my spiritual health was non-existent at the time, so I ended up falling into the darkest state of mind. I literally thought I was dying. People will call it an ego death. I agree. Because of that experience, I am not afraid to lose everything. Like, I will give everything up because I know how faithful God is, and I know how much he will give back if I'm willing to let things go. That because of that experience, having that ego death was the most enlightening experience, because it was the beginning of my journey with God, and really asking the question of, God, who are you? I know you exist, but who are you? But I still wasn't asking that question yet. I mean, I was still depressed. I was wanting to die. I wanted to die, like, bad. Like, at the time my brother took me in, I stayed with him for 2 months, and I didn't even get out of bed. Like, he would literally bring me breakfast into his guest room so that I could eat. Like, I'll never forget how much my brother took care of me at that time. I feel like he was God sent, because my mom tried to, but I was so angry at my mom because I blamed her for everything that I went through. And I blamed her for the trauma, and I started, like, pretty much calling her out on everything. And so it was a very tough time because I felt like my mind was broken. I felt like it was just on repeat of all of the trauma of everything that I let everybody do to me. And it was just on repeat. And I didn't have the scriptures or God to protect me at that time because I was unaware and I wasn't seeking God. 11:11. Because of my lack of seeking God, like, I would try to, but I was so exhausted because I wasn't eating that I couldn't get myself to go seek God. I went to a Catholic church to get help, and they were closed when I did have the energy to go. And then I went to go see my doctor, and even my doctor said, like, look, there are 3 very important aspects of your health, right? And it is your physical health, your mental health, and your spiritual health. And if any of these areas are lacking, you're going to feel depressed. So, you know, pretty much take care of these things. And I was like, I don't have the energy. I'm so exhausted. Like, I literally built the life that I have for the last 4 years in my own strength at that time, right? Completely against God's nature. So God was not blessing that life that I was living. And so I just felt the weight of all of those years feeling so wasted. And at that time, at that age, I just felt like that was my whole world, right? It was the first time in my life where I had freedom. Well, some of it, right? I was not free, but the illusion of it, right? I lived in San Francisco. I would go to the Golden Gate Bridge whenever I was sad, and I was being severely abused at the time. But at that time, I thought that was normal. I thought abuse was normal. Like, I knew intuitively it was not normal. I knew something was wrong, but I thought that was my fate. I thought that's what I was supposed to live. That's when I worked at the bank, and I was miserable there, so miserable. Like, I just wanted to be anywhere but there, and I just couldn't leave. And because it was my livelihood, I had to pay rent. I had to pay my car. No, I had insurance. I had responsibilities. I had a dog. I had a life, and I couldn't just walk away from everything, right? But my goodness, when I started learning about psychology, everything fell apart, because I was like, my life is built on lies, right? And it was hard. It was so hard. And like I said, I lived with my brother for 2 months because my mom could not handle me anymore. And by all means, I don't even blame her, but my brother was the sweetest to me. He didn't put any pressure on me. And then like 2 months in, he's like, all right, Michelle, like, let's go. Let's do something with your life. And I was like, all right, let's do it, I guess. I didn't want to do it, but I respected my brother to respect his wishes. And like at the end of the day, I was living in his home, right? Like I had to respect what he was asking of me. So he let me sit with my feelings and just hang around, right? Just hanging around and just process the sadness and the grief of the life that I had lost, because here I was 22 years old, right? And I had lived in San Francisco and was building a life out there, and then it was shattered in a blink of an eye. It was all gone. My car eventually was gone like a few months after that. Left my job, left home, left everything, left my adult life, and went back to my childhood. I did not look at my childhood city in a fond manner, just because growing up it was thrown in my face a lot that I was pretty much the poor kid, right? And it was usually by family members. It wasn't really like friends. My friends were like very cool about it because my friends lived in the same cities. But like family members, a lot of them lived in really nice areas, and so when they would come to my house was like the ugly house, right? So it's sad, but it's so funny because I was such a happy kid that like I didn't even care where I lived. I was just happy. But yeah, at that age, at 22, it was like I had built so much for myself, right? All an illusion. And I was just so sad and angry and depressed and dark. And then I was getting visuals of wanting to end my life. In my head, I was aware that my brother had a pew-pew. I would envision myself getting it. And that's something that a therapist is supposed to ask her client, is that if a client is suicidal, we must ask the question, are you getting ideas? Like, are you thinking about how you are going to execute this plan of yours? If they have been doing that, then they are at high risk for suicidal attempt, right? It's called suicidal ideation. It's when you're imagining yourself killing yourself. And I know this is a heavy topic, but because I've been there, I feel qualified to talk about this. And I also don't want it to be taboo. Like, these are real things that people go through. Literally, Job went through this. We're seeing that in the scriptures. I've been there. And I mean, if the person on the other side of the screen has never been there before, by all means, glory to God. Like, you are blessed, right? But for those that have been in that state of mind of wanting to end their life, like, you're not alone. And it is a very scary place to be in. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to be a burden to my family. My mind was literally broken at that time. And I didn't want my family to take on the weight of me as a burden, because they were already dealing with their own traumas of the childhood that we had, right? So it was like, what am I going to do? And so I ended up getting a job in Torrance, which is 5 miles away from the beach. And I still wasn't in the scriptures, right? I was still in a very dark place, but I was a property manager for an apartment complex on Anza Avenue. Never forget that place. There was a lot of darkness that happened there, right? But I have fond memories because that was where I knew God was real. On experience level, like the supernatural things that happened to me when I lived in Torrance didn't happen to me when I lived in San Francisco. Like, to the extent, because at that location, I was like, okay, God, who are you? Like, I called upon him to reveal himself to me. Whereas in San Francisco, I wasn't interested. That's where God showed me who he was on a spiritual level, right? Not religious, not in a building, right? Not in my brother's house, not in San Francisco, the city with all the money in it, right? That's what it's known for. But in Torrance by the beach, where I was outside, where I could look at the sky and I could just be in his presence. And that's where I learned to tap into that feeling of God. And I was open and I was ready, but there was a lot of dark things happening around me and I had no boundaries at the time. So it was really hard. And then when I was done there, which God gave me like a really clear sign, like a lot of clear signs, right? And it was finally the end of it and I let go. I was like, okay, I don't want this, God. I want you. Like, I want to know you. And so I ended up moving into another house, was in one of the most abusive situations of my life. And the abuse started getting progressively worse. And I was reading the scriptures at that time. It took me 6 months to read the New Testament. And my God, when I finished those books, my mind was literally transformed. And so when this individual in front of me was spitting at me and choking me and calling me out of name, I looked at him and I just smiled. And I said, my God, have mercy on his soul. I told God, forgive him, for he knows not what he does. And this individual attempted to end his life one time when we were very young. because I was trying to break things off, because I had found out that there was a lot of deceit going on. Anytime this individual threatened their life, like threatened to kill themselves, I thought that it was going to be my fault. But after reading the scriptures, I realized we all are held accountable for our own actions. And I knew that in that moment, that while all that abuse was going on, that I did not have to stand by and allow it, that I had to go. And usually the people that abuse you see something in you that maybe you haven't actualized in yourself or you haven't grown into yet, and they see that in you and it intimidates them and they think they have to dim that. But that's insecurity, because a secure person sees someone elevating and they're like, you go girl, you go guy, like keep going, like I believe in you, right? They're not sending hate your way. And if maybe something about your personality bothers them, they just find people with personalities that they enjoy. They're bringing joy to the world. They're bringing Jesus to the world. They're not trying to dim your light and say that you think things about yourself that you don't even think about yourself. Like, that's that person's projection. I went on a little bit of a tangent, but Job just reminds me of the darkest time of my life. And when I was 22 years old, that was the last time that I was depressed. After I had that spiritual encounter at the beach with God, I lived in Torrance for almost a year. It was 8 months to be exact. 8 is a very powerful number. And, and it's even eternity, right? 8. I met my maker there. I met my eternal God in my adult mind, right? Not in my little girl innocent mind, in my adult mind. And then I humbled myself and I started reading the scriptures, and I was like, God, I want to know you on a logical level. I've experienced you supernaturally. I've experienced you in this world around me, but now I want to know you here. And I remember, like I said earlier, coming across the scripture of my people perish for lack of knowledge. I was literally perishing in my sin. I was perishing in my life because I didn't know any better. And nobody was around to teach me any better. So once I gave my life to God there, I had hiccups along the way, right? Like times where I wasn't as intimate with God. Well, 11, 23, but it's 1, 2, 3 steps. I just wasn't giving God all that he deserved. And for me personally, God is calling me to higher heights, right? So I have a higher calling on my life. Not everybody has the obligation to answer to God to the depth that I have to answer to him, but I don't take it lightly. Right? When I'm in God's presence, it is the most powerful experience that a human being can go through. And so I don't take it lightly. And he is all over my life. He is all over me. He is all over my energy. He is all over everything that you see is all his. I belong to him. I am not owned by myself. I am owned by God. Independent contractor, right? But owned by God. So I don't get to make my own choices. I have to go to God for everything that I do, from what I eat, right? Like I don't even eat sugar because God has shown me that it's not good for me, right? Even the pizza I had the other day, it really affected me. I could tell. And it's like, I can't get away with things that your average person can get away with. God holds me accountable and he convicts me hard, and not aggressively, not abusively, just in a way that I know it's him. In a way that I'm like, God, I hear you loud and clear. My beautiful Father, my incredible Father that I reverence, that I respect, that I honor, because you honor me. You honor and have loved me before I even came to this earth. Like, my goodness, I have fallen in love with my Creator. It was a process because I had a lot of poison in my heart. I had a lot of trauma to heal from. I had a lot that was ugly and dark and terrible, right? And I took that before God and I said, God, clean me. And my God, did he clean me? And we're always on our journey to perfection. We're always on our journey to higher with God. But we have to respect the work that he's done. If we're telling people that like we're nothing and we're hating on ourselves and we're trying to dim our light, that's not humility. Humility is knowing who you are, standing in that authority, and lifting others up with you to know who they are. Right? Because people will try to put themselves down, and so you have to lift them up and say, hey, you're not down there, you're up here with me, right? And then there's people on a pulpit right here thinking that they're above everyone, and if they see something that makes them question their insecurity, right, they want to diminish and try and ridicule somebody that they don't even know. It's a recent experience, right? So it might be touched upon here because it is something that I went through. It's part of my testimony, right? So it's, although all is forgiven, although there is no anger towards the situation because God freed me from the situation, I will talk about it in passing if it aligns with whatever I'm speaking about, because since I'm speaking about the scriptures, it's crucial to talk about the darkness in this world, and that darkness exists everywhere. Just like the light exists everywhere, the darkness exists everywhere. And when you see the darkness, you have to call it out, especially if you're God's superhero. Declaration. I declare that God is my Lord and Savior, and I love him with all my heart and soul. And I pray that if you are going through something hard, that you find hope in the darkness. Even if it's really hard right now, that's okay, right? They call it growing pains for a reason. Growth hurts, but you are going to come out a much stronger and wiser person on the other side of being in pain. And that is something that you can look forward to when you put God at the forefront of your life. Outside of him, I cannot guarantee that, but with him, I can guarantee a whole new world. With that being said, my groceries are here, so let's go get them.
Freedom, found it in your eyes. Will you leave them open wide?
Open stretches.
Loving you.
Stretches.
Step one to admit. Was an addict from the first hit. 'Cause whenever you're